Hello, Daniel. Can you hear me? Can you see me? I can see you very well, but not cannot hear you, unfortunately. Still cannot hear you.
I was mute. So it's okay as well. Well, that's okay now.
Oh, okay. Now that's perfect. Now
Yeah.
I can see
Good
you.
afternoon. Are you in Luxembourg?
Yes, the
Ah,
sunny Luxembourg. Not
great.
not so sunny though, because it was we didn't have any summer, and now we will have the autumn, which will look like winter, or I don't know.
No.
So
Nice place where I spent 6 years there. So I love this country and this city.
yes, me too. So. For
Nice place.
sure, we will never get too hot here.
Mm. Autumn is gorgeous in Luxembourg with all the trees turning red and yellow. It's fantastic. It's really beautiful.
Yes, yes,
The
absolutely.
city, the city is lovely. Absolutely
Well,
lovely.
Danielle, I'm living. Well, I'm moving to another apartment right now, and my apartment will have a view at the castle of Grand Duc.
Ah, great.
So he'll be a neighbor. I'll
Oh,
have
yes,
yeah.
a good neighbor, or rather quiet. So you will be in the old city, in the center of the city.
No, no, I
No.
will be in Colmarberg, and that's where he actually lives.
Okay. Okay.
So his not his palace, his castle.
Mm. Oh yes, of course. Yeah, I understand. Yeah. 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 Okay. Lauren, Yuri, Akiro. Okay.
Do you know how many people will attend at the
I don't
end?
know. I don't know. Maybe my colleagues know, but well, people say they attend and maybe they go to another session and then
Mm,
and now we are four. We are waiting for the other presenter, the
okay.
other speaker, Gregory Greenman, waiting for him or her, I don't know, because there are several people. I think it's Gregory Greenman who announced that.
Mm, okay.
Our volunteer might be Daria Blinova, I don't know. Ah, Laura Leonard. People are coming. Quickly, anyway, well, it should start in a minute, so we can wait until everyone has
Sure.
joined.
Yes.
Hello, welcome to all of you. I see people coming quietly. Okay, so maybe I will open the session. Welcome to everyone. People will come quietly. We'll have 1 hour and a half for this presentation, for two presentations, so we have time for the presentation, for the discussion, for everything. So it's good. Take your time. And as I don't know who is here for the first presentation about economic evaluation in the United States. Maybe we will start with Yuri Marunov. Yuri Marunov, you are at the European Investment Bank, the EIB in Luxembourg, and you are with Olga Ivanova, whom I can see. And you propose to present to us the macroeconomic modeling used to stimulate the impact of EIB and its supported investment. So, well, Yuri, the floor is yours, and Olga as well. So welcome. We'll listen to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Daniele. I will share my screen. Just please confirm that you see screen.
Not yet.
Right now.
Okay, that's great.
Okay. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Yuri Marunov. I'm an evaluator at the European Investment Bank, and I will present a paper that we wrote together with Olga Ivanova from the PBL, Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency. So the paper was produced for the evaluation of the EIB cohesion financing that we did in 2018-2020. So just to give you the context, usually evaluations at the EIB focus on the relevance, additionality, effectiveness, efficiency, all important topics, but what interests European citizens ultimately is income, jobs, more broadly, the impact of the EIB on the economy. Now, of course, the macroeconomic effects of EIB financing have been explored before. For instance, the EIB economics department regularly assesses the impact of the EIB on the EU economy and also assess the impact of the so-called Juncker Plan, the European Fund for Strategic Investments, EFSI. Now, they do it at the EU 28 level. Our modeling exercise is new in the sense that what we look instead is the impact at the regional level. So supporting convergence is, of course, one of the reasons why the EIB was set up in the first place. So the evaluation sought to assess first what was the impact of the EIB support on the cohesion regions, and second, whether the EIB contributes to the reduction, actually, of regional disparities within the EU. Now, what are the cohesion regions specifically? You can see on these two maps, it's probably easier to visualize it. The cohesion regions are defined as regions with the GDP per capita of less than 90% of the EU average. These are mainly, as you can see in blue here, the regions in the Central Eastern or Southern Europe. And since 2013, approximately 1/3, so 30% approximately of the EIB financing goes to these regions every year. So we, of course, alongside in the framework of this cohesion evaluation, alongside the macroeconomic modeling, we used some more traditional tools like literature review, interviews, case studies, portfolio review. But the novelty was the use of this macroeconomic modeling. So here, in a nutshell, the three, and in more detail, the three evaluation questions for our modeling exercise. Just one word about the methodology. We looked at the impact of the investments supported by the EIB, not only of the EIB contribution itself. There are three reasons to that. First, to avoid the complex issue of the share of impact we can actually attribute to the EIB financing as such. The second reason is that it takes into account the potential leverage effect that the EIB can exercise on other investors, mainly private. And the third reason is that, well, the question of interest ultimately, if you think about it, is the impact of the EIB financing per se. Well, not the impact of the EIB financing per se as such, but the impact of projects financed by the EIB, or financed rather by the EIB. So just to take an example, what we think about is the impact of the bridge built, not the share of the bridge co-financed by the EIB. So this use of total investment as the input variable is a very common feature of all similar modeling exercises, whether they're done with Romulo or with Quest or any other tool. So from the point of view of the methodology, we use the European Economic Modeling System, EUEMS, which was developed by the PBL. This is a special general computable equilibrium model. Within this model, there are two scenarios. One, what we call the baseline scenario, it's the economy without the EIB. So suppose a horrible world where the EIB does not exist. Now, we also define a policy scenario. That's where we introduce the EIB financing. So the comparison of the GDP, employment level, level of productivity, etc., all these large macroeconomic aggregates, allows us assessing the impact of the EIB supported investment. So one example, we look at what would be the level of GDP without the EIB, the baseline scenario, let's say in 2030, and then look in the policy scenario, what would be the impact with the EIB. So the difference in level gives the impact of EIB supported investments. So the way it functions here is presented here in sequence. So in the first period, there is an inflow of funds to cohesion regions as they receive investments. So it expands aggregate investments in these regions and therefore has the impact on GDP, ultimately the second round effect on consumption, investment, etc. In the second period, of course, there is a repayment. So the flow is reversed. The cohesion regions lose some income because part of the income flows out. And then the non-cohesion regions and the rest of the world gain extra investments. But what remains ultimately in the long run is the increase in stocks of physical capital, human capital, etc. So there is an increase, which of course also depreciates over time. So there is this. And then there is the permanent increase in the productivity levels where the investments have been made. So just to point out, all the changes that I will present in this presentation are with respect to the baseline scenario. So inflow, outflow with respect to the baseline. And the second point, we postulate that there is a fixed share of consumption versus savings. So ultimately, the savings and investment move, but let's say if there is an income inflow in one specific region, well, it does not distort the choice between consumption and savings. So moving forward, we actually, in the framework of our cohesion evaluation, we had two separate types of work. First, we had the thematic report, chapter 5 of the thematic report, which considered only investments supported by EIB financing in the EU cohesion regions. So we looked at what is the direct impact of these investments on the economies of the recipient regions, and then what is the indirect impact, so spillover effects on non-cohesion regions. And then in the second time, we also tried to look at all the EIB financing in all of the EU 28 regions, and then try to measure the impact in the EU regions as a whole, and then specifically on cohesion regions, and then on non-cohesion regions. So with the first type of work, the key question was the relative importance of direct effects and spillovers. So in the second paper, the key question was the overall impact of the EIB financing for each region. Just if it remains a little bit cryptic to you, let me illustrate it with the following slide. So imagine in the EU we have two regions, both Italian. One is Sicily on top, and one is Lombardy here. So in the chapter 5, we look at we imagine only the EIB investments made to Sicily. And then we look at how it impacts Sicily and Lombardy indirectly, because the two regions, of course, trade. So the question is not trivial, because imagine an investment is co-financed by the EIB in Sicily, but then the promoter who benefits from financing buys all his capital inputs in Lombardy. So, and then the capital input producers subsequently spend or reinvest all their proceeds in Lombardy, etc. So basically this part of the multiplier accelerator mechanism leaks, in a sense, to Lombardy. So at the end of the day, the EIB finances investments in Sicily, but then the impact is mainly on the non-cohesion region of Lombardy. So the underlying question was whether actually cohesion regions do gain from the EIB financing support, or whether the whole effect leaks to non-cohesion regions. So that's the results of the thematic report. First result, quite reassuring. The EIB-backed investments do increase the GDP of cohesion regions. For instance, by 2025-2030, the GDP of cohesion regions is, on average, across regions, 1.3% higher with respect to the baseline than it would have been without the EIB. And the second result, for non-cohesion regions, the spillovers are fairly limited. So non-cohesion regions, or at least some of them, do benefit to some extent, but the spillovers are, well, the gain is rather small. So the cohesion regions actually benefit the most from the EIB investments in cohesion regions. So in my example before, Sicily, not Lombardy. We also looked specifically at two types of cohesion regions, so low income and low growth. So, well, roughly speaking, low income are Central and Eastern European regions, and low growth are Southern European regions, cohesion regions. And we see that actually low income and low growth cohesion regions gain even more than other cohesion regions. So the overall conclusion is that the EIB cohesion does indeed serve its purpose of reducing regional disparities. So the conclusion is that ceteris paribus, all else being equal, the EIB supports convergence. So cohesion regions do gain from the EIB financing, and not the other category. But of course, one thing that you might say is that this result is precisely ceteris paribus. In real life, the EIB does not finance only cohesion regions. It also invests in non-cohesion regions. So one might say, yes, okay, the EIB financing boosts growth, the GDP growth in cohesion regions, but maybe the impact in non-cohesion regions, if we look at all the EIB financing, is even higher. So ultimately, the EIB supports divergence, not convergence. So in order to address this, we wrote a paper, Macroeconomic Impact of EIB Financing on the EU 28 regions, where we look at the EIB investments in all the regions, cohesion and non-cohesion, just to take my example before. On the left, we looked at only investment in the cohesion region, Sicily. Now we are looking both at the EIB investments in Sicily and in Lombardy. Of course, they trade, so we assess the effect overall, and we look at whether the GDP boost in Sicily is higher than the GDP boost in Lombardy. We don't care anymore about the spillover effects. We just look at the overall effect on GDP in the cohesion regions and non-cohesion regions. Here are the results. So the verdict: first, almost all regions gain from the EIB financing. That's quite reassuring. By 2025, 2030, I mean, you can look at the green map. You can see that almost all of the regions gain from the EIB financing and the supported investments, with very, very few exceptions on the non-cohesion region side, a little bit on cohesion region side. Actually, there is a positive impact in terms of GDP, but there is a lot of heterogeneity across regions. So there are regions, in particular, you can see Greece, Hungary, the South Italy, and part of Portugal, I think almost all of Portugal, some regions in Poland that gain quite a lot. So the impact can go up to 7 percentage point added to the GDP with respect to the baseline, some of the regions. Then for some regions, there is even a very, very small, but still a loss, and some gain, but quite moderately. Just to word, the impact on employment is very much in line with the impact on GDP. It's positive, but a little bit less pronounced than the impact on GDP. And similarly, almost all EU regions experience an increase in productivity with respect to the baseline scenario. But once again, with a lot of difference as for the magnitude. So when we look at the cohesion regions category and non-cohesion regions category, we see that cohesion regions gain much more in terms of the impact than non-cohesion regions. So you can see, let's say for the period 2020-2025, the cohesion regions gain on average across regions an increase in GDP of 1.2% with respect to the baseline, while for non-cohesion regions there is still a gain, but it's more moderate, 0.6% on average across regions. This effect persists up to 2045, 2050. So when we look even in the very long run, 2045, 2050, we can see that still the GDP of cohesion regions is higher than it would have been without the EIB, and that this gain is higher for cohesion regions than for non-cohesion regions. So the main takeaway of this exercise is that the EIB does serve its purpose of supporting convergence. So apart from impacting positively the GDP in both types of regions, there is also the convergence because the cohesion regions gain more with respect to non-cohesion regions. Just one small point, of course, you can say that, well, let's take the example of Sicily and Lombardy. Imagine Sicily gain like the increase in GDP of 1%, and then for Lombardy it's 0.1%. But then if the initial GDP of Lombardy is say 11 or 12 times higher than on Sicily, then in absolute value, actually the increase is 0.1% for Lombardy might be higher than the 1% for Sicily. So we looked at this and we found out that in the very long run, so 2045, 2050, actually the cohesion regions gain more, well, in euros, the total aggregate gain for the cohesion regions taken together with respect to the baseline scenario becomes higher than for non-cohesion regions. So in the very long run, 2045, 2050, there is a convergence even in absolute terms, not only in terms of percentage differentials. This result is all the more remarkable that the share of EIB financing going to cohesion regions represents only about 1/3 of total EIB financing, and then the volume of investment supported by EIB financing in cohesion regions is about 42% of the total volume of investment supported by EIB financing across the EU. So the explanation
Yuri, we cannot hear you. What happens? Well, you have been cut. What's happening there? We don't hear anything. We've been cut off.
Danielle, I think Gregory has joined. If maybe.
Yeah, I see he's in, but all the others are out. So I don't know what happened. We've been cut off. Nothing.
Olga is saying that the EIB system has shut down Blue Jeans. It blocked the website.
Yeah. So what do we do? Do we give the floor to the second participant, or what's the problem here? Is it
I think from what I understand is that indeed they are struggling, so they cannot reconnect because EIB has blocked everything, so probably security system. So yeah.
Okay, so we will wait for him coming back. Maybe I will give the floor to Gregory, who joined now. Gregory Greenman. It was the second presentation of this session. Welcome, Gregory, and maybe your colleagues too. You're presenting a study on a very interesting analysis on the membership of the American Evaluation Society Association. So you are an independent evaluator consultant, and you've done a systematic review for 15 years and one cross-sectional survey of American Evaluation Association. So very interesting study, kind of scoop about, wow, where are the economists in the United States? So I give you the floor. I hope that the EIB will be able to come back so we have the end of the presentation of Yuri Marunov. Gregory Greenman, the floor is yours. We will be very happy to listen to you.
Let's see.
Hello, welcome.
Can you hear me? Wonderful. Thank you. Let's see if I can get the slide deck up here real quick. Yeah. Thank you. It's lovely to be here, although it's in a digital format, but I think that's where we're sort of heading with everything nowadays. Thank you for the lovely introduction. This is it's a very interesting study. It's actually a series of different studies, and
sorry, can we have the whole screen for Gregory, please? We have, in fact, Olga, but without any picture there. Maybe you can help. Oh, anyway, go ahead, Gregory. We will manage to. Okay. Anyway, we can listen to you. That's most important.
All right. So the study that we did, as you mentioned, looked at. Well, let me tell you a little bit about the background of this study. So the concept of value is central to evaluation, both etymologically and philosophically. Determining the value of something is what evaluation does. But a lot of evaluation, particularly program evaluation, specifically in the United States, doesn't look at the economic value of something. It will figure out if the goals have been achieved, but it very rarely looks at the cost of that, or how the resources were used, if that was the most efficient way possible. So we're looking at that. And evaluators in the US have been complaining, or lamenting probably is more accurate, about the lack of economic valuation in evaluation practice. Before I get along much farther, I'll go ahead and define what our definition of economic evaluation is. We're using a broad definition here, where, pardon me, it's the, guys?
Sorry, excuse me. My connection was lost for a while, I guess. Can you hear me? It's Yuri. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Yuri.
Okay. I'm not sure at what point the
Gregory, we'll come back to you after the end of the
Yes, I'm really sorry.
You can resume. I think we were just some miles after Lombardy and Sicily, but I don't know exactly what slide where we stopped.
Just a second. Let me share my screen. What was so? Can you now see my screen?
Yes, that's the last one.
Okay. Okay.
No.
So did we go through this?
Yes,
Can-
Dan. Yeah. No.
okay. Did I show this one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, too. We had that one too. Yeah, we were here, I think, something like that.
Okay. And this one, no.
Don't remember. Maybe you can
Okay.
resume there. Okay.
No. The last slide with the assumptions of the model you didn't show yet, Yuri.
Sorry?
So that one, that slide you didn't show yet.
Yeah.
Okay. So I stopped at this point, right?
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Do you mind if I get it from there? But please tell me, I mean, if you see my slides right now. So I think that, so we stop there. And I think that I presented as the main takeaway. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
okay.
yeah, go on, no problem.
So I said that the main takeaway of our work was that yes, the EIB does successfully serve the purpose of supporting convergence, and the cohesion regions actually gain more than non-cohesion regions, both in relative terms, as you can see with the percentages, but also in absolute terms when you consider a very long-term perspective, 2045, 2050. So as with any type of work using macro modeling, for this slide, the EUMS has a number of caveats. First, that it relies on a representative agent assumption, which simplifies the real world, like the real life behaviors. Then it is calibrated on the data for 1 year. So for some countries, or rather some regions, it is very much dependent on the context where the country or the region stood for this specific year. Then the model represents the economy, real economy driven by relative prices, so no money here. And then we assume perfect information and perfect financial markets, which goes a little bit, which is a little bit funny because the role and the mandate of the EIB is precisely to address market failures. So in terms of lessons and challenges, we have 3 main points to raise. The first is that macro modeling has an immense value of providing not only the answer to the question whether there is an impact or not, but also to say how much, even in terms of order of magnitude. The running models are running models is quite quick and low cost when we can rely on the existing model. The cooperation with the PBL, Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency, was of immense value to us. And the paper was also, we also benefited from the peer review by the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. So the only important point which goes in the opposite direction, like the word of caution, is that, of course, the results are only as reliable as the data is. So we have to do some cleaning with respect to the data we retrieved from the EIB internal database, and to make few assumptions about, in particular, the distribution between cohesion and non-cohesion financing. Just to summarize, as I said, we have 2 types of approaches and therefore 2 types of work. One is embedded in the chapter 5 of the thematic report, and the other one is a standalone paper, Macroeconomic Impact of EIB Financing on the EU region. So sorry for the loss of the connection, and I hope you can see and hear me clearly now. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So really sorry for this loss of connection all of a sudden, but that's. Thank you very much. And now we are, Olga and myself, we are ready to take any of your questions.
Thank you very much, Yuri and Olga. Well, sorry for this. I cannot see in the chat if there were any questions related to your intervention, since we had so many emergency messages telling help that I cannot find it. But are there any questions here in the participants, the attendants, about this very interesting presentation? Who want to ask a question here? No, no one. So I will give the floor to give again the floor to Gregory. Sorry, Gregory, for interrupting you, but the floor is yours for the presentation of your study. Gregory, thanks, and sorry.
Thank you. No worries. That's part of the fun of the electronic environment that we're in. See if I can maybe get my presentation up now, though. Like I cannot. Can everyone hear me? So there's a note that someone could not hear me. Okay, wonderful. So we use a broad definition of economic evaluation here. It basically includes any attempt or any time someone looks at the economic indicators related to a program. So that would include everything like cost-benefit analysis, cost effectiveness, cost allocation, cost feasibility, return on investment, and cost utility. We found that those 6 were probably the most frequent ones that were used by evaluators in their practice. We looked at 3 different domains in our study. The first was education, so university-based graduate programs in the United States. We also looked at professional development offerings in the United States, and also textbooks that were written and published in English in the last 15 years. For scholarship, we looked at the last 15 years of publications in evaluation-specific journals. That is the 14 journals that have been used by Western Michigan University and a number of studies looking at what's actually published in evaluation. And then for practice, we used self-reported use of economic evaluation methods by a sample of members of the American Evaluation Association. What we found is that for education, fewer than 1 in 5 of the graduate programs require any formal study of economic evaluation methods as a requirement for graduation. Less than 5% of all professional development offerings address economic evaluation methods, and economic evaluation methods only appear in approximately 1/5 of evaluation textbooks. And for that, we're looking for a specific, an in-depth discussion of how to actually go about doing an economic evaluation. When we look at scholarship, we discovered that only 78 articles over the course of those 15 years, which is 2.2% of the articles totally published, discussed performing an economic evaluation. Of those, about a little bit more than a third were cost-benefit analysis, and a little bit more than another third were cost effectiveness. The remaining, a little bit less than 1/3, were mostly cost allocation. They mostly occurred in the fields of medicine and K through 12 education in the United States. And then in the realm of practice, approximately 1/4, so it was like 27%, with a margin of error of 7.1% of American Evaluation Association members reported using economic evaluation in their practice. 2/3 of them mentioned that they had formal training in economic evaluation methods, and most of those were in a formal education setting, such as a classroom at a university. About a small percentage of them had just professional development outside of that. And similar to what we found with scholarship, the cost effectiveness, cost benefit analysis, and cost allocation were the most common types of economic evaluation reported being used by evaluators. And then I have a whole slew of lovely graphs and charts explaining all of this that nobody can see right now that I could go through and discuss. I'll say a couple of the surprising things that we found out. It made sense that cost benefit analysis and cost effectiveness analysis were the most common ones that were both found in the literature, the evaluation literature, and reported, because those are the most prevalent ones that people learn. One second, please. So the question is, now that we know this, now that we've sort of quantified and qualified what or the amount of economic evaluation, what does that mean for the field of evaluation? I apologize, just one moment.
Are you okay, Gregory? Oh. It seems that Gregory has a problem. Not feeling well. So I don't know what to do. We just wait until he comes back. Hope so. Hopefully. Oh. So many problems, technical and other problems in this session. Well, hectic times. Okay, well, maybe we will. Okay, he's back.
I'm back. I apologize. Sorry about that. I just had a little heart thing going. I wanted to make sure everything was fine.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Wow.
Good to be back too. So the question is, what do we do with this knowledge that we've had for years, but now we have quantified that there's not a whole lot of economic evaluation going on? And what does that mean for the field of evaluation? The importance of economic evaluation is, in the last few years, become more, I want to say, institutionalized. The Australian Evaluation Society in 2013 has been noticed this issue and has made concerted efforts to increase the amount of economic evaluation in evaluations in their realm. At the 2020 Festival Conference, approximately 1/4 of AES members identified their current skill level as being if they were competent, proficient, or expert. And that is up from what it was in 2013. We can't necessarily compare those numbers because we don't know that those are actually the same groups of people. We don't know if they're two different subsets of the Australian Evaluation Society, but we do know that they're regularly working to increase the amount of economic evaluation in their work. In 2018, the American Evaluation Association endorsed quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods, and in I think it was 2019, they added a section for economic evaluation in the American Journal of Evaluation. So there's a move, finally, I'll say, a recognition that economic evaluation is very important to evaluation, but that we still have a lot space to go. There's also, this ties into the competencies with the American Evaluation Association. And Clinton and Hattie, it's an article in the press. I don't think it's been published yet, but it's coming out in the next month or two. The cognitive complexity of various competencies in evaluation, which a competency in academic evaluation is part of competencies, at least in Australia, I believe, and there's sort of a movement to include it in the United States as well. It's that knowing that it's important and knowing how it's important have significant implications. And I think we're only at the knowing that it's important, at least in the United States context, and we don't know how to do it or know how to include that important information into our work. Yeah, at this point, I guess I'll just stop and take questions because my mind is sort of off.
Okay, so
sorry for that.
No problem. Any question on Gregory presentation? My question is, how did you get the data? Was it difficult to get the data for doing your study? Were they available? Did you have problem of confidentiality now that we have special regulation on that?
For the we looked at pardon me, for the study of survey of members, that wasn't as difficult as we thought it would be. A lot of members were more than willing to self-report what they were doing because it wasn't saying what they specifically did. So there was that nice little sort of out for them to say that, yes, we're doing academic evaluation. I can tell you what kind, but I can't tell you where or who or any of that. So they were more than willing to report that. And we had a really close, our sample matched the general population of American evaluation rather well when we did that. So we're pretty confident that it looks what it looks like broadly. And then as far as in the publications, those are publicly available. So that was complicated to get because it was over 3,000 articles, but it wasn't very, there was no issue as far as that.
Okay, any question in the attendance? Any question to Gregory? I don't see any.
I will close by saying that all the specifics in the are in the article that will be in AJE sometime in the coming year.
Okay. Martin Bruder, wow. Great. No questions. So, yes, Mr. Adesoba, Taiwo Adesoba, the floor is yours. You want to ask a question? Raise his hand. Okay. You can.
Can you hear me?
You can speak. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, great presentation, Gregory. My name is Taiwo. I'm a PhD student from the United States. I'm from Nigeria originally. I'm just wondering how huge is the demand for economic evaluation? Because when I was working in Nigeria before I came over to the United States, most of the evaluation people do kind of is limited to either impact or process. And right now in my program here, I'm learning more about economic evaluation. But right in the field, do you think that demand is there, especially in low and middle income countries? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I don't know for sure. It's hard to say what the exact demand would be. One of the students at Western is actually looking at the overall demand for evaluation, and one of the problems she's having is getting at that sort of information on what people actually want in their evaluations. I would say the sense that I get is that there's a demand for it, but people don't want to. So at least with the federal government in the United States, a lot of departments and agencies don't want to share their financial data with an evaluator to find out the answer to the question. On a couple of the evaluations that I've been party to, that has been the situation. They've allowed to share everything except for the cost of things, which is odd if there's a transparency in government, but that's a different conversation. I think that at least in the United States, there's a belief that evaluators just do impact and economists just do economic evaluation. And I think that's where the division comes in. That's just the sense I get. I don't have any data to back that up necessarily. But I think that if evaluators were more or trained more, or at least more comfortable with numbers in that sense, that there would be more of I'll take a step back. I think the demand is there. I just don't know if people know that the option is there, that you could have an evaluator come in and look at both the impact and then the cost of that impact. I think that there's this belief that those are two totally separate things and they aren't related. I think that that's not true. I saw that there's a question in the chat from Sonia about similar studies in the EU or the UK. I'm not aware of any of them. When we were starting this study, we didn't find anyone who'd done anything like this. We found a lot of authors lamenting that there's not a lot of economic evaluation, but no one who sat down and said, yes, there's not economic evaluation, and here's how we know there's not economic evaluation being done. And I also saw earlier that AI will upload these slides to the conference resources as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for responding very clearly. Are there other questions to Gregory? No? Do you want to resume your presentation or give some more developments, Gregory? Well,
I think I'm okay.
You're okay?
Yep.
Okay, so no more questions. And how do you explain that this way that education, vocational trainings, etc., did not develop the economic aspect? What is it? Is it a question of the courses, of the curricula, of cultural things? Is it the same in all universities, or there is something? Because your study gives very, very interesting conclusion, but very surprising as well.
I would say that I think, well, at least the way that evaluation sort of came out of the various fields that sort of disciplines that it sort of spawned out of, I think there's sort of two large groups of evaluation education programs in the United States. There's the education psychology set, and then there's the public administration set. And I think the public administration set has a much more, is more concerned with the costs of, or how costs work, and how spending works, because they're more of a sort of an administrator kind of programs is where they look at it, whereas the education and psychology section looks more at what sort of we get out of it. I think that's part of the difference between the two, and I know that there's only a few evaluation programs that come out of the public administration sort of mindset, and most of the programs are housed in colleges of education or departments of psychology, and they just don't, I don't know if there's a interest at the departmental level to have a class on cost analysis.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, are there more questions in the attendance? No? And question to Yuri as well? No? Yuri, I had a question about the model, the Dutch model that you used. Is it something well that is it usual? Is it how do you present that? The different.
Hear you very well.
Sorry. Well.
I cannot hear you very well. The sound is very low.
Okay. And now can you hear me? This is better?
Yes, better.
Yeah. I had a question about the Dutch model that you use. Is it usual to refer to this tool? Is it something that's used internationally? How did you select that in your professional activity? How would you present that?
Yes, so usually the EIB economics department relies on the Romolo model, the Romolo tool, and partners with the Joint Research Center of the European Commission to run the model and do the exercises. So the operations evaluation department head went to Brussels, and we communicated with the GRC about this. And the GRC told us that there is actually a more advanced version of this model, which is called EU EMS, and which is run by the PBL. And by the way, PBL is also the designers of the Romolo, of course, years ago. So we, of course, went for a more advanced tool, and that's how we use the EU EMS tool.
Okay. I understand. Okay. Okay, so we have, thank you. Thank you, Gregory, for giving your mail address. Well, anyway, we have no more questions, so I think we will close this session before the end of the allowed time, which was still 30 minutes, but I don't see how we can, in fact, ask more questions to the two speakers. This presentation was very interesting. Maybe the last thing I would ask to you two, in 1 minute, how would you maybe give some tips or hints to our colleagues about what you did in your experience in evaluation? Well, some words as a conclusion to give something that we can take away after your presentation, of course. Yuri, maybe.
Yes, in one sentence, data speaks. So use quantitative, either macro modeling or cost-benefit analysis, cost effectiveness, econometrics, statistics. It gives you credibility, and it gives you the solid rock on which you can found you can rely, and it empowers very much your evaluation. Basically the response from the general public, from every audience, the think tanks, the council of administrations, etc., is much more positive when you rely on quantitative models. It allows you answering your evaluation questions in a much more credible way, and also provide a larger variety of answers. Not only yes, no, but also how much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yuri. And you, Gregory, some words as a conclusion for all evaluators attending this conference.
Certainly. I would say that if you know how to do economic evaluation and feel comfortable doing it, then make that known. It seems that at least a quarter of us, at least in the United States, know what economic evaluation is and how to do it. But I think that the demand, is there, and I think it might be pent up. Just let them know that when you're speaking with a client, let them know that, hey, if you also have cost data, we can do that too. And that way you can know how much each change, how much this is costing you, and if there's a more efficient way to do it. And just make it known that cost analysis is also part of evaluation.
Well, thank you very much, Yuri and Gregory, and thank you for the questions to the participants. Sorry for the small problems we had. I will close this session before the end because there are no more questions. Thank you very much. That was really very interesting, and see you in other sessions. Have a nice evening. Goodbye.
Bye.